Tesla chief executive Elon Musk has traded barbs with former US vice presidential nominee Tim Walz after the latter poked fun at Tesla during a speech. Joining me now is David Scott to outline a little bit more about what's going on in this space and many more stories. Good to see you, my friend. David, take us through what's going on with Musk and Walz.
Yeah, that was a really interesting spat there on X, going back and then talking about Walter saying that he liked to go and look at the Tesla share price to go and cheer him up during the course of the day. And then Elon Musk turned around and said, well, I'd like to go and look at the photo of JD Vance in the Oval Office to go and get my cheers. So it's interesting to see that those two really don't like each other. But one thing at the moment that's really capturing my attention and the broader attention of traders and investors is just how poorly the Tesla share price has been since the gloss of the presidential result wore off.
Yeah, it's certainly been interesting to keep an eye on, and we did see the White House turn into a bit of a car lot recently. But what has been the market reaction to these calls for a leadership change within Tesla? This is interesting.
Yeah, it's clear that a lot of people, including a lot of long-term investors, have been looking at what's been happening. Elon's very, very busy doing his Doge with the US government, trying to go and find efficiency gains in the public sector. And then all the time, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of people who are very angry about what's been going on. And then that's starting to potentially impact sales, and it's certainly impacting the share price of Tesla. We saw a massive rally basically when Donald Trump was elected, and then all the way through December into the early parts of January. In the course of this year, as Elon's become very, very preoccupied with a lot of government side of what he's dealing with, Tesla seems to be neglected. And you can see when in the share price reaction, there's some clear concern out there that he's not paying enough attention to the company that he co-founded.
Yeah, he's neglecting one of his children. But do you think Tesla would benefit from new leadership, or is Musk still the right person for the job?
Look, you look over his background, and he's an innovator, and he wants to go and test the boundaries. So he's done an incredible job to go and get that company to where it is right now. What I question, though, is he's such an innovator and such a futurist that is anything else that he can go and do with Tesla going to go and achieve and enhance that reputation? I think when he looks at some of the space exploration that he's looking at, what he can go and do with the government, I question whether potentially maybe it would be better for Tesla shareholders and for Tesla more broadly to actually go and see Musk step away. Unless he can go and flip what he's doing at the moment and devote all his attention back. And right now, that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting stuff. Now, let's jump ahead. The Federal Reserve has updated its economic forecasts, impacting treasury markets and investor sentiment. You said there was some interesting stuff about how we got here. Tell us more.
Yeah, look, on the surface, the Fed left interest rates on hold at the meeting this morning. Not a lot to go and talk about there. But it's the underlying nuances in the economic projections that they went and put out that is really interesting. So they're still predicting 2 rate cuts this year when it comes to the median member expectation. But when you look into their forecasts, they have much slower economic growth, they have higher unemployment and higher inflation. Now, that's a very stagflationary type environment, not like what you see back in the 1970s and 80s, but still, it's not a really great area to be in. And then when you look at the actual forecast of individual members for those particular areas, there's some great concern out there that we'll see a big increase in unemployment, a big increase in inflation, and much, much lower economic growth. So who'd want to be a central banker right now? They'll cop all the flack if things go wrong, and if they get it right, there's not going to be anything to go and cheer for them about. So really tough place for the Fed to be in right now.
Yeah, very much so. So how have Treasury markets reacted to the Fed's latest announcement? What are we seeing more broadly speaking?
Look, when it comes to the market's reaction, there was a lot of relief that the Fed still has those cuts penciled into the profile, and they still see that economic growth will hold up reasonably well. So we saw equities had a really good day. Treasuries had a big move, so they were selling off. We had yields pushing high into the Fed decision, and then we saw a massive reversal coming through after the statement was released, the new forecast, and Fed Chair Jerome Powell did his press conference. And we're seeing that's basically going to flow through to local markets today. We'll see that bonds in Australia are going to open a little bit stronger, and we'll also see that the equity market will open higher at least, but will it be able to go and continue over the course of the day? And that's where the big sticking point is. It hasn't been able to do that recently.
Yeah, David, does this signal a shift in the Fed's interest in rate strategy for 2025 moving forward, or are they shifting gears looking to sort of scramble and fix all of this?
Well, they're hoping that inflation is transitory, which was that famous quote, of course, back in the early days of the pandemic that proved to be quite wrong back then. It hasn't really shifted the dial. They still think they're going to go and be cutting rates this year, albeit not a really quick need to go and move. But just given what their forecasts are at the moment, and they've got two mandates. They've got inflation and unemployment. And if they had to choose one or the other, for me, they'll always choose to try and protect the labour market. So to me, there is a risk as to what they're going to do here. It's likely that there'll be more rate cuts than the two that's being penciled in today.
And what does all this mean for everyday consumers and businesses out there who are already doing it quite tough?
Yeah, that's the other sticking point. Higher inflation is not going to go and be helpful to anyone, particularly lower income earners and households that are already struggling. At the same time, there's relief coming through. Apparently, when it comes to the fiscal side, the Trump administration is pretty keen to go and extend tax cuts, reduce tax on tipping and the like. Maybe that will be some relief. But when you talk about what the Fed implications are, if the US dollar starts to soften as well and you have import tariffs on top of that, that's going to be a pretty ugly inflationary spike coming through. So it's not looking very good out there, particularly for those who are already struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, Donald Trump is expected to introduce new trade policies that could have major consequences for the Aussie economy. Take us through what kind of policies we're expecting to see introduced.
Yes, of course, this trade review coming up from the USTR is going to be delivered on April 1st. And then on April 2, all things being equal, Donald Trump and the administration has gone and signalled they'll go and introduce reciprocal tariffs, including on countries that have value-added taxes and GSTs like Australia. Now, a lot of Australian exports are very agricultural in nature. And so when you go and think, well, maybe they'll be able to go and sell into other markets. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But where the issue for the government is going to be is, do they go and slap tariffs on US imports? Lots of industrial machinery, lots of cars, lots of pharmaceuticals, and lots of services, software and the like. Will Australians go and like to have a 10% increase coming through on those prices? I'll be highly doubtful of that. But that's going to be a pretty tough decision should these tariffs be implemented in early April.
Okay, so how could these policies perhaps impact Australia's key exports? As you mentioned there, minerals, agriculture, we've got some pretty solid ones.
Yeah, the biggest individual item that goes to the United States as an export is beef. Now, I'm pretty certain that we've got a lot of Asian neighbours that will be willing to go and take that up as well. So I'm not really that concerned about the agricultural side. I think that you've seen time and again that there's been shifts in weather, supply disruptions, demand changes as well around the world. And we've always found a way to go and find a marketplace for those agricultural exports. But for me, what the big test is going to be is what's going to happen to the import side of the equation. Will we respond with reciprocal tariffs of our own? Because that's going to go and increase cost of living pressures, and a lot of things that people enjoy using, the software in particular, is going to likely be impacted, and that's not going to be very palatable to the electorate.
David, could this push Australia to strengthen trade ties with other nations like perhaps China or even the EU?
You'd imagine so, but we've been trying for a long time. China, the relationship has been really rocky. We know that in the past. Can go and change in a dime depending on what's going on in the political situation at the time. And with Europe, yes, there's always been that demand to go and sell into the world's largest economic bloc, which it still is at this point in time. But the problem is that there's a lot of rules and regulations that the Europeans love to go and abide by. So to me, I think it's going to be a difficult process. Look, the Trump administration is going to be in place at least for the next 3.5 years. We might have to just go and bide our time on that front. But yes, it will try and go and strengthen ties elsewhere. But whether it actually leads to any success is probably debatable at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. The ride continues. I guess we'll just brace ourselves, hold on, the ups and the downs. David, I want to thank you for joining us on the program. Hopefully we speak again very soon.
Always great to be here. Take care.